In this activity, we're going to go ahead and make our own Time magazine cover. Time magazine is probably one of the most iconic magazines of all time. As you can see here where I went the Time archive vault, there are certain elements, or there's kind of a consistent theme that tells people that this is indeed a Time magazine cover. Although not every element is same from a month or issue to issue, there are some common elements. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this cover. And typically it's going to have a red border. I'm not sure that I've seen one that doesn't have it, although I think it's safe to say 99% of the time it is going to have a red border. Then there's going to be a small amount of white stroke that we'll go ahead and add. And then there's the word time itself, which is, as far as I know, always in the same font. Most of the time it's red, but in this particular case it happens to be white. Sometimes it's transparent. Sometimes it's behind the subject, like it is here. Sometimes it's in front of the subject. Other than that, other than some small details like the date right up here and maybe some little bit of text down here, the Time magazine covers are relatively consistent, and it's such a powerful brand that when you look at a Time magazine cover, you almost instantly know, even if you've never read Time magazine, that this is a Time magazine cover. So let's go ahead and get started in creating our own Time magazine cover. To build our Time magazine cover, we're going to use Pixlr Editor, which is a great program. Just runs on any web browser, so you can use it on your Chromebook. Nothing needs to be installed, and it's completely free. So go to pixlr.com/editor, and it brings up, this is the old editor. Let's see if we can get into the new beta. I'm going to close that, and if I remember right, the link is just the letter E. 2020 edition. There we go. So this is the one I'm going to use. Truthfully, I've never used it before, but I can't imagine it's going to be too terribly different. So what we need to do is go ahead and create a new image. Now, we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to call this Time cover. And then right here, you'll notice this says the maximum width is 496 by 496. So Time magazine is taller than it is wide, so I'm going to make this one 4096, and then we need to go ahead and do just a little bit of math here to figure out what we want for our width, because, well, Time magazine's not exactly letter size paper, which is 8.5 by 11 inches. That's what you're going to probably be printing it on, so we'll just go ahead and start with that, and that way we won't have any cropping around the edges. So I need to do just a little bit of algebra here to figure out what my proportions are as pixels. So I will say 8.5 is to 11 as x is to 4096. And then, and you wondered when you were ever going to use this stuff, says the former math teacher. So you go 8.5 times 496 and divide by 11. So let's do that. 8.5 divided by, or excuse me, 8.5 times 4096 divided by 11 equals 3,165 pixels. So that will be the proportions that we'll use for width and height to get our 8.5 by 11 or letter size image. So I'll go ahead and in here put in 3,165 pixels. Background, we can always create a background later if we want to. So we'll go ahead and click create, and that gives us this grid. This has kind of a checkboard pattern in the background, which means that no pixels exist there. This isn't a white sheet of paper. This is just an area that we can draw on that has the proportions of 8.5 to 11, which is the same as letter size paper. Okay, before we get started here, I'm just going to do a couple of quick little things. I'm going to click on that little gear down in the lower right corner and turn on the lighter user interface, because I think it's just a little bit easier on the eyes. And then I'm going to copy this URL up here, for Pixlr, and I'm going to add some tabs here because Pixlr will only let you work on one image at a time, and I'm hoping this works. I guess we'll find out. That way I can open up some different things. So I'm going to go in here and open up a Time magazine cover, and just to take a look at some of the iconic parts of it, it almost always has a red border and then a small white border or amount of stroke. It's got the word time, which we'll go ahead and insert. It has an image. Sometimes the image flows over the border, sometimes it doesn't. And then just depending upon the particular issue, there'll be some text. And so we're going to go ahead and add all those different elements. So I'll come back in here, and the first thing I'm going to do is select my layer. That's very important. Now, although at this point we only have one layer, Pixlr doesn't select that layer by default. So I'll click on the little star here for shapes, and let's see, I want to change my foreground color. So I'll just move this over up here to the top right corner to make it red. And I'm going to make my shape just a rectangle. I don't want any stroke. And let's see, we'll go ahead and click fill. And I think because I'm doing fill, I think I'll go ahead and reverse these, and let's see what we get. Yeah, there we go. So there's my red background. So now we're going to put in the small white border. That's this part right in here. To do that, I'm going to also make a shape, but this time I don't want any fill, and I want my foreground color to be white. So I'll just drag up into that corner. And right now the stroke is set to 0 because that's what I used last time. So let's just try, I'm just guessing here, let's say 5 pixels. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw. Well, that's not good enough. So we'll undo that. And let's try bumping it up to 15. And yeah, that looks better. So I'll undo that. And this time I'll be just a little bit more careful. And I'll try to get this as concentric as possible, or centered. And that looks pretty good. So at this particular time, because we're using a beta version, I'm not sure if this thing's going to crash or not. So I'm going to go ahead and save my file. I'm going to call it I'll just call it one time. And I'll call it BG for background. Doesn't really matter what you call it, just as long as you remember what the name is and you can find it. I'm going to choose PXD because that is the Pixlr native format, and that will allow me to preserve all my layers. If I saved it as a JPEG later on in the process, that wouldn't be quite so good because it would just be an image and we'd lose all the control that layers offer us. So I'll click download, and you get this message that tells me it's making a large file, so we're just going to have to wait. Okay, it's telling us it's unresponsive, so let's click on wait. Okay, so here we go. It finally popped up, and so I'm going to put it in this folder here and just click save, and we're good to go, and we can close this window. So now at any time if it crashes or I lose something or I got it so boogered up that I can't fix anything, I can kind of go back to a previous version. My next step is going to be to delete the interior of this red frame, and to do that I'm going to use the wand select tool, or in GIMP it's the fuzzy select tool, or in Photoshop it's the magic wand. I'll click on that. Across the top here you can see that we have a mode where we can just get a new selection. Nothing's selected so far. We can add to a selection if we want to click more than once. We'll be doing that a little bit later. Or we can remove a selection. The tolerance is always a guess and check thing because every image is different. We're not going to want any feathering or any fuzziness to the edges of our selection, at least not at this point. And the other ones we'll get to later on. Now, when I click in here, nothing happens. And this is something that surprises me with this version of Pixlr. Typically, you've always got a layer selected. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight my layer over here on the right, because if I don't, I can't use my tools. So now I'll click, and you can see we have the marching ants on the inside. So it looks like the default tolerance was good. And so at this point I can just go ahead and erase or just hit my delete key. And notice you get the checkerboard again. That means that this is empty of any information, this checkerboard area. It's not black, it's not white, it's not red, it's nothing. There's no pixels there. But that's okay. That's going to work just great for what we want to do. And so I'm going to come up here and, well, deselect is grayed out for some reason. So what I'll do is I'll just go Command or Control D, and that will do it for me at this particular point. So again, I'm just going to come up and do a save as a PXD file to, I'll just call this time red frame, just to save my work, and click download, and I'll put it in the same place as before. I decided rather than using a picture of myself that I'm going to go ahead and use Bugs Bunny for my Time magazine cover, so I need to go find an image for him. So I went to Google Images and I'm looking around, and one of the things you want to do is click on Tools and select Large. This is important because remember, our Time magazine cover is 4096 pixels tall. So if you bring in a real small image and you need to go ahead and scale it up like we're going to be doing, you'll run into trouble because your image will, just get all pixelated. So as you mouse over these, you can see the different resolutions. This one's 1200 by 800. We'd like something taller than wider. So when you look at this one, it's 722 by 1500. And when you look at this one, well, this one's almost 4000 tall. And another great characteristic about this that I know I'm going to like is that there's a real contrast between Bugs Bunny and his background. So if you take your own picture, make sure that you take it in front of a contrasting solid color. That's going to make this work that we're going to be doing here in a moment a whole bunch easier. If you take the picture yourself in front of a busy background, it's going to be difficult to isolate just you so that you can put it on the cover. So I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to save this image as a JPEG image, which is just fine. I'll just call it Bugs. I'm putting it in my folder. Putting all my work in this folder so I can keep everything nice and organized. I hope you're doing the same. I'll click Save, and then I'm going to come into Pixlr here and open an image, and I'm going to open up Bugs, and let's see, I haven't seen this before. It says it's very large. Do you want to resize it? And the answer is no. So I'm going to choose the maximum ultra high definition resolution, and so there we go. Okay, at this point, I'll be honest, I've completely lost track of where I was at. I just got a phone call from my son who reported to the Advanced Naval Flight Training at Corpus Christi, and so in the meantime I found another picture of Bugs here, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this one. As before, I'm going to take and double click on the little padlock to unlock my image, and then at this point what we need to do is go through and delete all of this white that's surrounding Bugs for our cover. So to do that, you could use the eraser and increase the size up to the maximum and make a nice sharp edge, and then come out here and erase these pixels. But regardless of the size, it's going to be awfully difficult to get right next to Bugs. It would take a lot of time. So I'm going to undo that work there and instead use our good friend, the wand select tool, to select the white pixels. And that does a pretty good job, but it doesn't quite get all of the areas that we want. For example, there's no marching ants right inside of here. So I'm going to select my mode to add to selection and click inside there as well. There's a little spot right there that I'll click on at this particular point. A little spot right in there I want to get. And let's see. I think that's probably about it. Now you can also hold down the Shift key when you do this sort of work to add to your selection. But at this point I have two choices. Just as before, I can click on the eraser tool, bump up its size, and erase right over the top of Bugs without worrying about actually erasing any of him. I don't have to be careful at all. Or I can just hit the delete key and all the rest of it goes away. So let's go ahead and zoom back out here. And that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this. And this time when I save it, I'm going to save it as a PNG file. And the reason that I'm going to do that is that unlike JPEGs where the background is always going to be white no matter how much erasing you do, I'm talking about this area in here, a PNG file maintains the transparency. So I'm going to go ahead and download that. Shouldn't take too long. So this will be Bugs and a PNG file. Just go ahead and click Save, and then we'll close it. And the next thing we'll do is insert Bugs into our Time magazine cover frame. So here I am back at my Time magazine cover frame, and it's time to go ahead and add a picture of Bugs Bunny, or in this case, a picture of yourself. So when I go to click Open Image, if I've got two images here, one is a JPEG and one is the PNG file. And I'm going to go ahead to make a point and insert the JPEG image first. And so I'm prompted, do I want to make a new image or do I want to just add it as a new layer? So I'm going to click it as a new layer. And you see what I'm talking about? We've got this white background here. And that's not going to work for our project. So we're going to go ahead and undo that. And that's characteristic of any JPEG object. It's always going to have pixels in the background. So we'll undo that, and this time when we choose to open the image, we're going to choose the PNG file, which maintains a layer of transparency, and now it creates a brand new layer. And I'll go ahead and move Bugs down about right there for right now, because I can arrange this because I've got my own layer right here, so I can work with this anytime I want, any way I want. And click outside here, and at this particular point I really like this, so I'm going to do what I've done before, and we're going to go ahead and save it. And because I want to maintain my layers over here, I'm going to save it as a PXD file, and I'm going to just simply call it, I think I'm on number 4. Time with Bugs. The number's probably more important than the title. So I'll click download, and it'll give me the usual prompt that I've got to wait while the computers that are located somewhere in the world are grinding away. And then we'll go ahead and move to the next step, which is going to be to add the Time logo or the word Time across the top of our image. Okay, let's go ahead and grab the 4 letters TIME for our magazine title. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and right click up here on this tab, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. So this is a Time cover that I picked specifically because there's a very sharp contrast between the black letters and the white background. That's going to make it much easier to go ahead and copy or select that particular image. So I'm going to go ahead and copy just the letters. So edit, copy, and then I'm going to go ahead and edit, paste, and it puts it right down here in the middle, which is fine, but more importantly, it creates a new layer. So if your background layer is locked, go ahead and unlock it. Otherwise, once it's unlocked, go ahead and delete it. That just leaves us with the word time. So let's go ahead and zoom in on that a little bit. And you'll notice that it's jaggedy or pixelated. And that's because when I was downloading covers from the Time archive here, they only provide the images at a certain resolution. They want you to pay for the covers, which is understandable, but for this particular lesson we can go ahead and work with this. So I could take and select each of the individual black letters, but they're not just pure black. You'll notice there's some gray and some really, I don't know, I guess you call it dark white. There's even some pixels out here that we want to avoid. So I'm going to try instead to select the white and only the white, leaving everything else behind, and then delete that. So let's go to our select tool and let's turn the tolerance all the way down and just click outside here. Now that's a little too much. I mean, it didn't quite get what we want, so let's try that again. Let's try tolerance about 19. So I'll click outside to deselect and inside, and that's much better, but you can see here that what's great on the M, but out here on the T, we're missing it just a little bit. So I think we're getting close. So let's try the tolerance. Let's just bump it up a little bit. Click outside to deselect, select inside, and again we got a little too much white, so I'll click outside. Let's bump it up to maybe 57. These are just guess and check numbers here. And that looks, well, that looks a lot better. So we're just going to go ahead and work with that. Remember, we selected the white area and our layover here is unlocked. So now I can take my eraser tool and change the size up. And again, I could just go ahead and probably hit delete at this point. That brush is huge. You couldn't actually see the brush. So for some reason, I cannot invert my selection. I think it's probably a bug somewhere. Again, this is a beta version, but I can work around this by doing this. I'm going to go ahead and just select outside, and then I'm going to do a select, or rather reselect my black, and I'm going to turn the tolerance down to 0 so that it grabs, excuse me, I'm going to turn my tolerance all the way up to 100 so that it grabs any pixel of any color. And then I'm going to click on my color selector and come to my reds and pick the reddest red I can. Click OK. And then hopefully I can use my paint bucket tool or my fill tool. That's not working for some reason. Again, it could just be the beta, but I'll work around that by grabbing my brush and turning the size up to ginormous. Oh, it's black. Somewhere in there I lost my color. There we go. And there, with a ginormous brush, I've now got that. And so I'll take and copy all of that, and then hopefully I can come back into here and edit and paste it. And there it is right there. I'll scale it up. It did put it in as a new layer. I'll just kind of get it centered here. Notice that nice, watch this nice purple line that shows up to show us, that purple vertical line that shows us that we are aligned with the center of our image. Again, we have a new layer over here with the word time in it. And so at this particular point, I'm going to go ahead and stop and do another save. So I decided I'd go ahead and put Bugs Bunny in Rome. I love Rome. I've only been there a couple of times. It's absolutely remarkable. So I searched for Rome with Google Images. Again, I clicked on Tools and selected Large Images, and this is the one that I liked. So I'm going to right click and save the image as, in this case we'll just call it Rome. I think I've already done this once while practicing for you guys, so yeah, so we'll go ahead and replace it, and then I'll come back up into Pixlr here, and again all of these pixels in the background, this white and gray checkerboard area, are empty pixels. There's no information there. There's plenty of information with bugs, lots of grays and pinks and blacks and whites, and of course plenty of reds with our title and our border, but nothing out here. So I'm going to come into Pixlr now and go to open an image, and I'm going to select my picture of Rome. And I don't want to make a new image. I want to just go ahead and add my picture of Rome as a new layer. So let's see what happens. Well, a couple things happened. One is it created a new layer for me called Rome, and it brought my image in. And it just brings it in to help fit the frame. So we need to resize it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it up so that the top is just a little bit above my frame, and then pull it down so that it's about there, and I can move it left and right if I want. Maybe I'll just put it about there. Because it's in its own layer, I can come back and shift this around anytime I want, as long as I've got all my layers, and that's why we're saving our files in the PXD or Pixlr native format. So I'm just going to go ahead and click outside here to apply this. And of course, this isn't what we finally want. We want the Rome layer to be at the very bottom. See what just happened there? Now I'll just click outside here so you see what's going on. And so now we've got bugs at the Coliseum. Very iconic image, so I don't think we need to have a picture of the entire Coliseum there. But there's one other little problem, although again, Time magazine sometimes does this where they have the main subject overlap the border. But Bugs's foot is over the border, so if we want to fix that, I can just drop it down below that layer. And if I wanted Bugs's ears to go across the word time, and I think I do because it will just look a little fancier, I'll just move this layer down. Whoop, what did I do there? Okay, now I want Bugs on top, so I'm just going to move Bugs up to the very top and then move the layer up here on top like that, and now I've got everything that is arranged in a way that where I've got my Coliseum in the background, I've got my title, I've got Bugs in the forefront, and yet I've got also have the frame so that it is framing my entire image. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and now next we'll go ahead and add some text. Okay, so at this point I have everything saved as a PXD file so that it maintains all of these layers over here on the right. Very, very important if you want to come back and edit anything. But at this particular point, I want to just go ahead and add some text. A little bit of text for the cover right here. So I'm going to click on Add Text. You get several different options across the top here. Of course, any of these can be edited later on, but you can click and choose any of the fonts that are built into your system. And every computer is going to be a little bit different, but I'm just going to go ahead and choose Arial, which is a very common font. By the way, it puts in some sample text right down here, but we can go ahead and edit that at our pleasure. You can choose a color using the color picker. Choose anything you want. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it white because I think that's going to work pretty good. Actually, I take it back. I'm going to deliberately mess up here and pick black. So I'll click OK. So I'm making black text. And then I can make the size larger. You can see what happens on your screen. Again, this can all be edited. And then over here you can align it left, center, or right. You can choose to make everything uppercase if you want. And there are some other tools here. You can duplicate layers. You can click on the trash and go ahead and delete it. So now that I have this picked, I'm just going to go ahead and double click inside of it and type in what I want it to say. So I'll just type in Roman, hit space bar, bugs, hit space bar in, there we go. Roman bugs invasion. I'll go ahead and justify it to the left. And then I'll put it right down here. That looks pretty good. However, the black doesn't really work out, right? There's not much of a contrast there. So let's change the color. And that stands out much better. Now what you could do if you wanted to stand out even a little bit better is put a transparent or somewhat translucent box behind it so that this stands out just a little bit better. So I like that. Notice that there's a new layer that's created by the text, so you can come back and choose that anytime you want. But at this point, I'm going to call that good and save it. So there's one more thing that I want to do before we wrap this up. I mean, you can go through and use the text tool if you want to put in the date of the issue along with the volume number, or you can even take and put in person of the year. When I look at this picture here, we've got Bugs Bunny in the foreground and the Roman Colosseum in the background, and they're both tack sharp focused. If we take a look at this time cover here, you'll notice a very common photographer's effect, which is called utilizing depth of field or adding bokeh to an image. And that is, this photographer focused on the primary subjects, the modern royals in this case, but you notice how the background is blurred. Now we're not working with an original photograph. However, we can simulate that effect by blurring the image here of the Roman Colosseum. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click on my Roman layer, or my Rome layer, and then come up under filters and choose to blur it. And this comes up, and you're going to have to again kind of do a guess and check and diddle around with a little bit, but I'll just go ahead and slide that over to 42. There we go. And click apply, and then see how that looks. And that looks pretty good. You know, I mean, it looks a lot more realistic because that's the way cameras take pictures, and after our brains have looked at billions of pictures, well, this looks a little bit more realistic. I'll do an undo so you can see the difference. See, that's focused. And that's with it blurred. So at this point, I really like what I've gotten done so far, and I'm just going to go ahead and save it. Next, we'll take a look at how we can export it. So now that we're done, I want to emphasize a couple of things. First of all, if you close the tab on your web browser, your work is gone. All of your work will be gone. So we've got all these different layers over here on the right, which hold our text, our Bugs Bunny, our title, our background, etc. So you absolutely want to take and go to File, Save, and somewhere, whether it's your Google Drive or on your desktop or whatever, save it as time finished, or whatever you want to call it. Make sure that it's a PXD file, and then click on download, and it'll go ahead and download it for you. We've done that before, but I just wanted to emphasize that again, because if you don't have that, you'll never be able to open your work back up and put somebody else on the cover of Time magazine, for example. However, I'm just this time going to save it as a JPEG, and I am going to save it as high quality. Matter of fact, I'm going to bump this all the way up to 100% and click download. And that happens pretty fast, so I'll go ahead and click save. I'll close that, and then I'll go file, open image, and let's see. And there's my time finished image, and I'll just go ahead and click create new. And everything looks the same, but if you look over here, you'll notice everything has been compressed into one layer, just one simple layer. So I can no longer edit the text or the picture of bug or the title or put them in a different city other than Rome. So that is the difference. However, once you've got what you want, once you have that JPEG image or that PNG image, that works as well. You can go ahead and share it with friends. You can put it in your Christmas letter. You can share it on social media, whatever you want. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you like it, just go ahead and please subscribe. And if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to help.